Hi, Mike Smith here with a brief presentation on teaching tips for writing essay structure, primarily academic essay writing, but this is a structure that can also be used for presentations of all kinds. A detailed version of this presentation goes into a lot more comprehensive detail, including whiteboard screenshots, the source of material from an academic English book, and also a little bit more information on the various types of referencing. But as you can see, there is a process that begins from the task and all the things that need to be considered, and the lesson series of lessons shows the evolution of the essay from beginning to end. We start with the academic writing process, and the thing that I really want to emphasize for my students is that there are at least 5 steps before they actually start writing. Typically, our ESL students launch into writing too quickly, and as a consequence, their output product and quality suffers. So getting them used to the process that precedes the first draft is a very useful investment in time. Equally important, of course, is the relationship between the first and second draft and the review process, incorporating comments and suggestions, and then finally a final draft before submission. And all of this reflects what actually happens in the academic context. And this is also very useful for the students in a ESL-TESOL context to understand before they go into the academic environment. In this brief presentation, I'm going to go through the process rapidly. I just want to give you an idea of the teaching process in parallel with the essay writing process. So the first part is simply to help them to understand the structure of the essay, including the reference list. And from there, we work on the introduction first, and fleshing out the introduction. What are the contents of the introduction, and looking at examples, and then looking at the relationship between the introduction and the conclusion. Then looking at the details of the conclusion, which is obviously a paraphrase of the introduction with a couple of extra bits and pieces. And then after that, we look at the body in detail, sort of generally looking at a 3 body paragraph essay as a typical model in an ESL environment. So then just looking at the detail of the first body paragraph, for example, and starting to introduce the idea of that there being a topic sentence with a couple of examples and a conclusion sentence. And in the body of the paragraph, we start to introduce the idea of citations, which reference the reference list, of course. And speaking of the reference list, going back to the basic structure, the reference list is contrasted with a bibliography, just explaining the difference between those two things. Looking at a typical simplified format of the reference list before going into the detail of the different official formats. And so coming up with something relatively simple for the purposes of the ESL-TESOL academic essay task. Going back to the citations, making sure that the students understand the nature of citations, being paraphrasing with the odd quote, and really just focusing on getting them to understand that they can take material from sources, but they need to paraphrase them in their own words. Then going into the second body paragraph, and then looking at some of the different types of reference structures. In Australia, actually the most common is the APA style, and also introducing a typical online tool such as VU EasyRef from Victoria University in Australia. So that is the overview of the academic writing process in the ESL-TESOL context. Thanks for listening.